How we doing, everybody? Welcome into another great episode of the Mile High on Broad podcast. We have a wonderful episode for you guys today. We're getting ready to head into the brand new season. We are counting down the days. We're going to be recording this episode probably a couple of days before you guys actually listen to it. But we are the week before kickoff for this season. I know Mike and I we're fully entrenched in football. I know Mike's got a ton of fantasy drafts going on. I think my entire holiday weekend has been literally fantasy football drafts. I did 3 today. I got 3 more tomorrow. Some people tell me it's excessive, but hey, like it's what I do, man. I love the sport, so I'm super pumped for the season to start. I'm really looking forward to it, and we're gonna have a great show today. We're gonna do a predictions and hot takes episode for this season. It's gonna be a ton of fun. We're gonna start off with some predictions, and then we're gonna let the spicy stuff happen. We're gonna give some hot takes. Some of these are scorching. Neither me nor Mike have seen each other's hot takes, so you guys will get to see the actual interaction and reaction for the hot takes that we have for each other. I got some spicy ones. A little hint: one of mine you guys have already heard. I know it's kind of cheating, but I'm gonna stick with my guns, and I'm gonna keep the one I gave you guys earlier this off season. So. Mike, how we doing?
Dude, I'm pumped. I'm jazzed. I'm ready to go. We have NFL kickoff in like 4 days from now. We got kickoff on Thursday. So man, I'm ready to go. I can't wait. I don't even care that the Eagles aren't playing on Thursday. I'm ready for that opening kickoff and just ready to rock and roll, man. I'm so excited.
Football, man. It's all that matters. It's the best season of the year. So I'm pumped for it. So we're gonna start off with some predictions. We're gonna go some AFC, NFC Super Bowl predictions. We'll talk about MVP and we'll talk about who we got for Coach of the Year, and kind of we're gonna cap off our predictions this year. If you guys like this episode, maybe we'll dig a little deeper next year. But we're gonna start off AFC. I want who you got in the game.
Yep.
And who you got winning.
Yep.
And obviously that'll roll into our Super Bowl. So let me hear who you got. Who you got AFC. Who's in that game?
So this is going to probably bleed into a little bit of a hot take, and part of my hot take a little bit later, but we'll get into that when we get into that. So for me in the AFC, in the championship game, I've got the Bengals versus the Jags.
No Chiefs.
Wow. No Chiefs. And so yeah, look, for me, a lot of this is coming down to Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson. They're finally going to be working together for, I guess even a full year. I know that Peterson got in there last year, but the second year was when in Philly we really saw that big step forward for Carson Wentz, and so Trevor Lawrence is clearly much more talented than that. And so combining that with the soft schedule that the Jags have coming up this year, that division is terrible. Their schedule is just really, really soft. They could easily win 12 plus games this year. They should at least be favored in 12, 13, 14 games this year, maybe. That's division's just really bad. And so I think that they're going to end up playing the Bengals. And so for me, the Bengals, I think they're going to have a step back. So if you guys remember a couple weeks ago, I actually have the Ravens winning that division, but I have the Bengals making the AFC Championship game. For me, that's a couple of things. So for me, the Ravens can't be Super Bowl contenders until I see them actually do it with Lamar. Lamar has struggled mightily in the postseason. So, he's put up some all-time great numbers in the regular season, and he's been really bad in the postseason. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow almost gets stronger. And I think having Joe Burrow play in a tough division where you're playing the Ravens twice a year, playing the Browns twice a year, and the Steelers twice a year, I mean, that whole division could be above 500. And so I know we saw a couple years ago with the 49ers, they were like 9-7, snuck into the playoffs, and they made the AFC Championship game. And it's because that division was super strong. So I think having that strong schedule is really going to bode well for the Bengals in the postseason, even though it may hinder them just a little bit in the regular season. And so I think that Burrow, Higgins, Chase, and Mixon all playing together for the same time for the last time. I think they're going to be out on a mission. And I think that they're going to end up competing for the Super Bowl this year. So I got Bengals over Jags in the Super Bowl.
All right. So I agree with one of your teams. I also have the Jags in.
Okay.
Which, I mean, for everybody out there, probably not a huge surprise. I'm a massive Trevor Lawrence supporter. And just like you, look, I think they made great strides last year. I think that this year they got a couple more pieces. Calvin Ridley, looks, at least in preseason and in practice. And I get their hype pieces and their tape, but I mean, it doesn't look like the guys lost a step. You add some of these new weapons, new running back. This offense is going to be potent if Trevor Lawrence can take half a step forward. And I think the defense is good enough, right? I think that we've seen that you don't need the best defense, but you need a top 10, top 12 defense. And as long as you have that, I mean, look, the Chiefs have been winning Super Bowls and they've never had the best defense, but they've had a good enough defense and then just a ridiculous offense. That's how I kind of see it. And to kind of counter that, that's my other team. I have the Chiefs in against them. Man, I went back and forth for this other team. Like I wrote it in. I was like, all right, Jags. I got the Jags in. And I'm like, who else am I going to put in there? And I looked at the Bengals, and I looked at the Ravens, and I looked at the Chargers, and I'm like, all right, so I get what you're saying. Hey, man, Lamar's never done it. He's going to fall apart. Blah blah blah. I'm not going to argue with you, right? And then that was my thing with the Chargers. I'm like, hey, man, they could be really good this year, but again, Chargers going to Charger until I see it. It's hard to do it. And it was those reasons that I kind of just went back to. I'm like, hey, man, until they don't do it, I can't not pick the Chiefs. I get it. It's boring. It's a weak take. But every time I bet against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? Hey, man, they lost Tyreek Hill and blah. It doesn't matter, 5,400 yards, right? Like, I mean, he's just a freak, man. And until he doesn't make an AFC championship game, I should just put him down in Sharpie as in the AFC Championship game. So look,
I mean, it's basically the Arrowhead Invitational at this point.
Yeah, look, I have no problem with the Chiefs not making the AFC Championship, none at all. I would love for it to be Bengals Jags. I just can't pick it without until they don't do it. I just can't. I can't do it. I do have the Jags beating them though, and that again is part of my. Yeah, I know, right? Shocking, but maybe it's part of my bias. Maybe it's part of that. Like, hey, I won't not put them in the game, but that doesn't mean I have to let them win it. Again, part of it for me is just it's the next step forward in the evolution of Trevor Lawrence is what allows him to push. You see a lot of these great young quarterbacks that come into the league. It takes them a few years to really start ramping up. And it's in those third and fourth years you really see him kind of take over. That's where we are now. And I think it's his turn to kind of take over and get into the Super Bowl. So I got the Jags over the Chiefs heading to the Super Bowl. We're going to move on to the NFC. This is going to be a super exciting conversation for nobody because I think that we're both going to have the same two teams. I think it is the same exact two teams that were there last year. Is that who you have?
Yeah, no, sorry. I've got the Cowboys are playing the Washington, whatever they're going to be calling themselves now. No, yeah, no, I got the Eagles and the Niners in a rematch. For me,
because there's no one there. There's no, I looked at the division.
Yep.
The Niners are stacked. The Eagles are stacked. There might be a couple of teams. I'm like, hey, like you could be good. You'll probably win your division. There's no one else. Not a single other team, I think, is even in the same hemisphere as the Eagles and the Niners are. So I don't even think I need to go into too much. Like, there's no one else in the NFC. It's a weak conference. The Eagles and the Niners might be the best complete teams in the NFL, but everyone else is just so. Yeah, Eagles, Niners. Where we're going to differ is who I think we're having to pick because I'm going to guess that you got the Eagles winning.
I sure do,
and I have the Niners winning. Just like we did last year.
Just like last year. Just like 12 weeks ago.
Just like that. Now, here's my caveat. We had the same debate last year when the game happened. Yep. We broke it down. They're both ridiculous teams.
Yep.
And then they lost their quarterback. So tech problems. So this year they're not going to have quarterback issues, and that's what's going to help push them over the top.
Yeah. So look, and for me, a lot of where I even got to where I'm at right now is with looking at the division. Like Dallas to me is the exact same thing as what we were just talking about with Lamar a minute ago, where they may be a great regular season team, but they struggle mightily in the postseason. They lost their OC and Kellen Moore, he's actually now over in LA. And now Mike McCarthy, who has been a pretty bad clock management coach, is now also going to be running your plays. So I think adding extra onto his plate means that while Dallas might be good again in the regular season, they're going to struggle again in the postseason. I don't know about the Lions, man. Like I'm not all in on the Lions like a lot of people are. And then the Vikings were somewhat frauds last year. So that's pretty much everybody in the whole division, in the whole conference. So yeah, I'm right there with you. And I don't know, the reason why I think that Philly's kind of looking like, pretty much an unstoppable juggernaut, at least in the NFC right now, for me is, man, that quarterback play is so different between Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts. And, Brock Purdy had a very good showing, but I mean, he was Mr. Irrelevant. He is coming off of Tommy John surgery. Now, I don't know how much that's going to matter, come 8 months from now when we're looking at the the playoffs. But I mean,
you're telling me you're not afraid of Sam Darnold?
Yeah, right. Sam Darnold, does he scare me? Gee, let me think about that. No, he scares me about as much as Christian McCaffrey does at quarterback. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the quarterback play is really kind of just what puts us over the top right now. And then, that's really what's going to come down to is just we have an elite quarterback. 49ers probably have a solid quarterback.
Yep. It's I don't know if I disagree. Like both are stacked defenses, both have good offensive lines, both have great weapons. I would agree that Hurts is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. I would hope no one would make that argument. If you do, 49ers fans, it's not true. But look, I just think that the way that Mike Shanahan structures his offense allows these guys that are not per se elite quarterbacks to function almost at that level. So, hey, look, we'll see how it goes, just like we did last year. Look, what I hope for at the end of the day is that we actually get to see the game and it plays out in its entirety instead of us getting, I enjoyed the end of the season last year, but I felt that both the NFC and the Super Bowl, at the end just kind of left me going, man, that's not what I wanted. We end up with losing Brock Purdy, and it's like, man, the Eagles win. I'm not saying they wouldn't have won, but like I wanted to watch that game, man. I look forward to that game. And then you get to the Super Bowl and you got a trash field that wasn't taken care of correctly, and then you get that bullshit call, which again may or may not have determined the outcome, but it's not what I wanted from the game. So hopefully this year goes a little bit better. Again, they're both clearly the top teams. We'll see which one goes to coin flip, and I have to be on the other side from you. So. All right, so that puts our Super Bowls completely different because I got Jags Niners.
Yep.
And you got Eagles Bengals. Who do you got winning?
Yeah, so for me, I really think that this could really be a mismatch. I mean, what do the Eagles, what do the Bengals do well offensively that the Eagles don't do well defensively, right? Like the Bengals are primarily looking to sit back, pass the ball, and just kind of let Joe Burrow pick you to pieces, right? Well, it's going to be a problem when you're facing arguably the best D-line in the league again, and you have arguably the worst O-line in the league. A couple of years ago, we saw Burrow just, pull off some magic against Tennessee, where he took, I think it was 9 sacks in that game, and they still managed to go on to win that game. But I think that the Eagles team roster, especially on defense, also is just going to be too much for that, right? Like we have elite pass rush, and then we have arguably the best cornerback duo in the league. And I know that they'll be stacked on 2 of the best wide receivers in the league, but again, I think that just that pass rush against that O-line, it's just not going to be able to hold up, and it's going to cause some issues. And meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Philly's offense, what can't they do? I mean, we've seen them go 350 passing yards against the Tennessee Titans last year and just, light them up. And then we've seen the Eagles run for 350 yards on the ground the next week and just light up the Green Bay Packers, right? Like, if the run game isn't working, we'll just pass the ball. Passing isn't working, we're going to run the ball. I think Philly has a really good chance this year at being top 5 in yards per attempt, both rushing and passing this year. You can take your pick at running, whether it's Swift, Penny, Gainwell, some are Hurts, some of Boston Scott, right? Like take your pick. We just have so many weapons. Or if we want to light you up in passing, we have A.J. Brown, who's a bona fide number 1, top 5, top 8 wide receiver in the league, along with Devontae Smith, who is arguably number 1 in his own right. along with Dallas Goedert, who's probably a top 3, top 5 tight end in the league. So I just think that there's just too many ways for Philly to beat this team. Jason Kelsey's coming back for one reason. He wants to win that Super Bowl. And I think this is probably his last year. And so I think we're going to send Jason Kelsey out on top.
Yeah, so look, we try to objectively look at the league as best we can and not let our own personal team biases come in. And look, I don't know if I disagree with anything you said. So I know they're your team, but I mean, the roster is just loaded everywhere you look at it. So yeah, I don't think it's just a homer pick. I think yeah, you make some very good arguments. I got the Niners and the Jags, and I know what I just talked up Trevor Lawrence making that push, and that's what pushed people to the top. But it's for similar reasons that you kind of made for the Eagles winning is why I have the Niners winning one. Look, I think they're just teams that like they should have a championship and they just don't, and they're just there and there and there. And look, I get it. Some teams just they never cross the finish line. But the Niners to me are that team that they're stacked on defense, arguably the best defense in the league. They have a great offense, right? And they have arguably one of the best offensive minds, running the team. And the fact that every year they're in contention, even when people think they're out, they're in it. And they can just never quite find a way to get to the big game and get it done. I think this finally comes in. Again, if everybody's healthy, I think it's a whole different game than what we saw at the end of last year. I don't know if Brock Purdy's a real thing, but until I see something that says he's not the guy, I think he's good enough to run Kyle Shanahan's offense. The way he's going to put that together, he's going to structure it so that Brock Purdy doesn't have to be phenomenal, and he's better. He's better than Jimmy Garoppolo was, and he can make some of the throws that he couldn't. So if he can do those things, the rest of that is just Kyle Shanahan running the show. I'd love to see him get a ring, and I think he's going to do it. It's hard. I look at this and I go, man, I got the coach that I love and the quarterback that I love on opposite sides. I'm going to side with the coach, and I'm going to say this is when they put it all together and they take it down.
Yeah, for me, I think my biggest concern with the 49ers is they're starting to remind me a lot of whether you want to call it the 90s Buffalo Bills or the end of Drew Brees' career in the Saints, where every single year they're on the cusp. Yep. They're knocking on the door. You think they got it. They make one or two moves. They're right there, and then they just can't get it done. And
can't cross the finish line. And look,
can't cross that finish line.
Maybe that is who this team is, man. And maybe they do it again this year. And I can't have a quarterback injury excuse to fall back on. And maybe they just always that team that they're going to be really good and they should be winning, and they just for whatever reason stumble right before the finish line. Maybe they are, but this team is great. And I think they have the pieces that they need to get it done. And I think their defense is just better than what the Jags can put on. And you can win a lot of games with not a top defense, but if you have the whole thing put together, it definitely helps things out a little bit, I think. So,
yeah.
All right, let's chat MVP.
Yep.
I put money on this every year.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you put it on this year?
I put money on Russ.
Oh God! Oh, sorry. I forgot about it. I actually wasn't trying to make it. Okay, sorry.
That didn't work.
No, it did not.
For all the bets that I put last year, like I missed all of them, and the only one that I was like, "That's all right." Like you knew Russ wasn't going to win halfway through the year, and I'm like, "All right, I just wasted money." But like I was like dead set that I was going to win comeback player of the year, and then the NFL had to do what the NFL does and be stupid.
You got Geno'd.
And I get Geno'd, right? So whatever.
Hey, not that we're talking about it too much, but if you're putting money down on all this stuff, I think DeMar Hamlin's probably a really safe bet for comeback player of the year.
He is, man. It's horrible. So I was going to put money on Russ this year to win comeback player of the year because again, if he's a half decent quarterback this year with Sean Payton, and he's a quarterback, which apparently is like the number one reason you give it to him. But then like I looked at the odds. And where they're good for a lot of these guys, right? Like Lamar's in there and Russ is in there. And like, I'm like, oh, those odds are good. And then it's like DeMar Hamlin. And it's like, if you don't bet on DeMar Hamlin,
you're an idiot.
you're not going to win because, regardless of what the odds are, right? Like if DeMar Hamlin sets foot on the field for publicity reasons alone, as good as it is for him. But I'm like, there's no way they don't give him the award. So it's almost like locked in stone that DeMar Hamlin, as long as he steps foot on an NFL field this year, at least once, will win that award. And And then the odds for him winning are so trash. Like I'd have to bet like $400 to make like $10. It's not. There's just on the off chance that he doesn't play the rest of the season, right? Like it's just there's no benefit for the risk. So I'm not going to be betting on that one this year. But I will put some bets on the MVP, and I always like talking about MVP. And look, we know it's probably going to be a quarterback. I don't know who you got, but I got a quarterback because that's who wins this award. It's a passing league, and I think it's almost impossible for anybody who's not a quarterback to win this. As great as they are, I think that it's going to go to the quarterback, right? Like they touch the ball in every play. They're the face of the league. They're the face of the franchise. They run the show. They're the ones who are going to win it, right? Obviously, Patrick Mahomes won last year, and he's really good. You got Patrick Mahomes winning it this year? Because I don't.
Nope.
Foreshadowing. All right, who do you have?
Yeah, so you remember how before the show I was telling you that you'd kind of be surprised at one of my picks?
I do vaguely remember you saying that.
And then you'd kind of be like, what the hell, Mike? Yeah, so for MVP, I got Trevor Lawrence, and
let's go.
Yeah, and I thought the what the hell would come from all the critique that I give this kid, and for me a lot of my critique comes almost from a place of love. Like there were such high expectations for this kid coming out.
Yep.
And I don't think you can find a person that follows football seriously that was like, yeah, no, I'm not a Trevor Lawrence believer, right? Like every single person was a Trevor Lawrence guy when he was coming out, and yeah, he struggled a lot, and it seems like almost all of that came down to Urban Meyer was just a terrible head coach. I ended up hearing a story a couple days ago, actually, where they were talking about Trevor Lawrence was at practice with Doug Peterson the first couple of days, and it sounded like Lawrence was struggling a little bit. He threw like a pick or two, and the Doug Peterson basically said that, yeah, when Trevor came over to me, like he couldn't look at me. He was so depressed. He felt awful about himself. He just had zero confidence. And Doug's like, dude, calm down. It's just practice. And like, that just really just goes to show where his headspace was at the beginning of the season. And so just how much an S show Urban Meyer is and was and is. And just Doug Peterson came in and helped boost his confidence. And so I think a confident Trevor Lawrence has all the skills to be an all-timer. People talk about him like he's going to be Peyton Manning 2.0. And, in general, those are the kinds of things I can see. I can see this guy going down as a top 10 quarterback of all time. He has all the talent to do so. And then coupling that with this year, he's got what should be a great wide receiver in Calvin Ridley, who's a very good number one. He's got a very good number two in Christian Kirk, who played like a number one last year. And along with that, he has a couple of really good wide receiver pieces. And then he also has Travis Etienne in his backfield, who was just a stud for him when he was in college. They're really good friends. So all in all, I think that the Jags are probably going to win somewhere between 12 and 13 games. Schedule's pretty soft. He could throw for, 4,500 yards and 38 touchdowns in the air, plus whatever else he gives you on the ground. And so, yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a very big year this year. And I think he'll be a consensus top 5 quarterback coming into next year.
Touches my heart that you believe in my boy T-Law so much. I never lost faith. Obviously, I've backed that guy a lot. Look, it's shocking if you think about it. The fact that one of the greatest quarterbacks that of our generation, maybe to ever play the game, we might have lost because Urban Meyer is a jackoff. Like, that see. We could have lost a great because of Urban Meyer. Like, fuck you, dude. With that, hope he never gets work again. Man, so funny, believe it, I do have money on Trevor Lawrence to win the MVP this year, so I do hope that you are correct. This year I actually did put money in 2 places, and the other place is the guy that I have for MVP. And Trevor Lawrence was on my short list to put on this for MVP this year, but
very clearly put money on.
Yeah, for lots of reasons, right? And look, I already talked him up a ton, so I'm not, and you just did, so I'm not gonna spend a ton of time, but I think the dude is generational. But this year, for my MVP, I'm going with a guy that I've been touting up all off season. I think that this guy is an elite quarterback to begin with, and I think he just got some pieces around him that will even make him better than he already was. All right, this guy has already won awards. All right, And this year, he's going to top it off with his own award. And before you guys go out there and say, oh, but he plays for a team that just falls on their face, I get that. But that has nothing to do with the MVP award. And that award I'm giving to Justin Herbert.
I like it.
So Justin Herbert is a stud. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, this guy's setting records coming out. He's winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, he's just an elite level passer. And I think it's funny because, you know, people forget. So the year that he was going to come out as a junior, he was the consensus number one. There's no question he's the guy. And he goes, I'm going back to college, right? And then he goes back to college, and then the next year he comes and he falls down, right? And he doesn't maybe play as good as he did. People are like, oh, I don't know. It's all about Tua, and then it's all about Burrow, and he's falling down a little bit. Turns out this guy is really, really good, and he's still as good as everybody thought he was the year before, but he just got buried behind people. And I think some of that is still carried into his career, where he is more of that. He's not a runner, right? He's more of your prototypical pocket passer type of quarterback. Not that he can't run or doesn't have that athleticism, but he's going to be more of that drop back and throw kind of guy before he's going to be a scramble and do that kind of like crazy Patrick Mahomes kind of stuff, right? Kind of like a guy named Joe Burrow. And I think that he's kind of always been in Joe Burrow's shadow since the draft and he's been dominant. And when I look at him and I go, all right, so like he was great. Last year obviously wasn't as good of a year, but I mean, his entire receiving core, I don't think played more than 3 games together because they were all hurt. I mean, there was a point when he didn't have Keenan Allen, he didn't have Mike Williams, and he didn't have Jamal Palmer, and he didn't have Everett, right? Like he had no one to throw the ball to. And then he broke his ribs week 2. Like, don't forget that he broke his ribs in week 2 and played the whole season with it, right? This year, we're coming back. Everyone is healthy. And again, health can change, but everybody's back healthy. All right. He has more weapons than he did before, right? Because now we also added first round wide receiver in Quentin Johnson, who can fill in if one of these guys gets hurt. So now you have a full array of weapons. You got Austin Eckler coming up at the end of his contract, who's already played ridiculous, is going to keep doing it. And then I think just the kind of icing on the cake that just puts us over the top is he's got a new offensive coordinator. Now, I don't think the OC that he had last year was necessarily a bad OC. In fact, I think that he only got fired because Staley's a horrible coach and he needed a way to keep his job. We'll see if he keeps it this year. But bringing in Kellen Moore, I think, is huge for what he's going to be able to do this year. And I look at who Justin Herbert already is, and I'm saying this guy is great. He's got great weapons. And now you're going to bring in an offensive coordinator to just step it up that next level. Let's look at when Kellen Moore got to Dallas with Dak Prescott, who we both agree is not special in any way, shape, or form. I get it, Dallas fans, you think he is. He's not. We can debate that another day. But I looked at it.
I don't even know if he is anymore. I think they're kind of over him.
And let's look at some numbers. So before Kellen Moore gets there were like 3 solid years. Dak Prescott before Kellen Moore gets there, where he was the true starter, played basically a full season. So in those 3 years, I averaged them out. He averaged 3,625 passing yards and 22 touchdowns, almost like clockwork, like 22, 22, and 23. I think, but so that's his stat line, right? 3,600 and change, 22. That's who he was. Kellen Moore gets there. And with Kellen Moore there, again, average, all right, over the seasons that Kellen Moore was his OC, he's now throwing 4,675 yards and on average 33.5 touchdowns per season. So for those of you not good with math, that's an increase of 1,050 yards per season on average and 11 more touchdowns. And it's not like he did it once, like multiple seasons average out. That was the increase that you got with having him come into town. So if you look at the great Justin Herbert, and as good as he's been, right? Again, he sets records as a rookie. If I look at his averages, and I'm even taking last year's shit show of a season into this average, all right? He's averaging 4,600 and change, just under 4,700 yards and 31 touchdowns now, all right? So if I don't even give him the full bump that he gave to Dak Prescott, right? But like, if he gets 1,000-yard bump, right? 500 puts him over 5,000 yards, right? But let's say he gets 1,000-yard bump. He's at 5,500 yards. So he's right there knocking on the door with Peyton Manning's records, all right? Then you look at his touchdown counts, which were already at 31. So let's say he gets to what? 45,
Yeah,
50, right? You can't tell me that this guy's throwing for 5,200 yards and 45 to 50 touchdowns that he's not the MVP, right? Those numbers are next level numbers. Those are the kind of numbers that Patrick Mahomes is putting down. People are like, yeah, there's no question that Patrick Mahomes is the MVP. And I see that as a full option with a healthy thing, and a guy like Kellen Moore coming in here just tweak this offense and take it to the next level. So, look, I love Trevor Lawrence. I'd love him to get it, but I look at the numbers and I look at what he's getting. I'm like, man, Justin Herbert is that dude. And
yeah, look, I for multiple reasons, I hope you are correct. And my biggest reason why I hope you are correct is because even if he doesn't win MVP, if he puts up those kinds of numbers, he is my dynasty league fantasy quarterback. And if Justin Herbert's out there putting up 30, 35 points a game for me in fantasy, I will be in solid shape. So I will be very happy with that. But yeah, I don't know. My biggest issue with with that would be, I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. Do you think they're going to win enough? Because I know, so let's just take the Chiefs out. Let's take the Chiefs out of it, right? Let's say that the Chiefs do win the division, but he still puts up those kinds of numbers. Typically in the past, from what we've seen, other than I think the Matt Ryan year, one year where he won like 11 games, I think every year MVPs have to win somewhere between 12 and 14 games pretty consistently to win the MVP. So if they finish second in their division, first off, I guess, do you think that they can get to that 12 win number? And if they don't, do you think he can still win the MVP if he puts up those kind of crazy numbers?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you're putting up those crazy numbers, they have to be winning games, right? The Chiefs could win 14, which for the Chiefs is like, I mean, that's a standard season for the Chiefs. So could they win 12 or 13 games and finish in second place? Sure, right? Do I think that the Chargers are going to find ways to fall on their face? Yes, because that's what the Chargers do, right? That doesn't, to me, that's saying, hey, look, they're probably not going to win the division because that's what they'll do, right? They might have a shot. It might come down to it, and then they'll flop the last week of the season, and do something stupid, and do something stupid to cost him, right? But I still think he could still put up 350 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game, and then they do something stupid and lose the game on a missed kick, or he forgets to call timeout or something stupid like that, right? Because again, so there's nothing to do with his performance per se with them losing it. And again, I just, and then look, they can go to the playoffs and fall on their face because that's what they do, right? I mean, they were up big and then allowed a guy who threw 4 picks in the first half to come back and beat them last year. Like, that's just what they do. But his stat lines were still ridiculous in that game, even though they ended up losing it. And when I look at it, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, look, this team is going to be that good that I think that they can win 10, 12, 13 games, right? I have to go back and look at their schedule. I can give you a count, but I think they can win a ton of games. And if they're winning a ton of games and he's putting up those numbers, like, I get it. If he goes 8 and 9 and he puts up 5,000 yards, so like, yeah, I'm gonna go with the guy who was on a pace to be undefeated. But like, if you're winning 10, 12 games, if you're pushing the Chiefs come the end of the year for the division, and you're putting up the bump, and again, I don't know if he's gonna get the full bump, but if you take the Kellen Moore bump that Dak got and you just take that same bump and give it to Herbert, like, it's not just that, like, hey man, that's a great season. Like, those are historical. 5,600 yards is what that would put him at. Like, that's a historic record-setting season. Like, and I don't think you cannot give it to a guy if he's setting records, with those guys. And I get it. Like, 5,000 yards, Pat. There aren't a lot of those in the league, right? And when Jameis did it, he threw 30 and 30. So it was like, oh, you threw a lot, but you weren't that good, and your team was right. But if Herbert comes out here and he throws, I think he averages somewhere between like 8 and 10 picks a season. So if he throws 50 and 15 and 5,600 yards, like, and they win 12 games, I don't think there's any way you can't give it to him. I mean, it's going to be ridiculous numbers. So,
right.
Which again, I hate because I think Staley needs to lose his job, and I just don't think there's a way it's going to happen with the team that's going to be on this field. So,
hey, maybe we get lucky. Maybe we get the best of all those worlds. Maybe Herbert throws up 5,500 yards, 50 touchdowns, 12 picks. They're a 12 and 4 seed. They're the 12 and 4 team. They're the 5 seed. And then because Staley's an idiot, he forgets to call timeout in the postseason game, and therefore they lose off of that, and therefore he gets fired. So hey, maybe we can have everything. Look, what one can hope, right?
We can hope. We can hope. All right, so I want to see what you think of my Coach of the Year.
Okay, lay it on me.
So originally, when I went to do Coach of the Year, I kind of wanted to put Tomlin in there. Okay. Because again, the dude's great. I think he's one of the greatest coaches out there. Sure. He never had a losing season. And everything I've heard from camp, all the beat reporters, like Kenny Pickett looks really good. He obviously
Yep.
was not good that year. He's taken a sophomore leap that a lot of quarterbacks do. I'm like, man, this team could win 10 games, man. And if these guys win in 10 games and maybe he's pushing, I mean, he's not the bottom end of the division like they thought he was last year. I'm like, bang, could they be like, oh, look what he did? But I decided, nope, I'm scrapping that. Not going with Tomlin. Dan Campbell,
Yeah.
bite
There
their
was
kneecaps off. Dan
Yeah.
Campbell.
Yeah.
I'm giving him coach of the year, man. I think the defense is going to take some steps forward. They had some young guys last year. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, played well for a rookie. I think he just plays better, as he kind of grows into it. And look, they had the highest scoring offense in the league last year. And now they go in and they upgrade both of their wide receiver positions. They're going to get some better help on the offensive side. And they added a stud tight end in the first round. I think this offense is going to be great again. And you already know I have them winning this division. I know you don't agree with that, but I'm just saying if Dan Campbell turns around and this defense is a half step better and that offense looks kind of like they did last year, right? And they do win this division, it will be the first time the Lions have won the NFC North since 1993. That is 20,
I wasn't even born.
20. Mike was not alive last time the Lions won their division. Oh shit, it's not 20 years, that's 30 years. Well, I wrote down 20. My math is trash. That's 30 years. Holy shit.
30
so
years.
30 years.
I'm 28.
They haven't won their division. I'm saying like 20 years. You're not under 20, but you're right. My math was wrong. 30 years, right? So they haven't won. If he wins that division, right? And I just, man, when you build that up, because I mean, look, they've tried it before, and this team has always found a way to flop, right? If he comes in and everybody looked at him like, who is this dude? Bite off kneecaps, but he's built a culture, and now they're winning.
Yep.
And if they knock off that 30 years, it'd be hard not to have him in that conversation for coach of the year. So I got my boy Dan Campbell, coach of the year.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a bad shout. I know that there was some talk with him last year. I know you, me, and friend of the show, Jordan, we have a group chat going on where at the end of the year we were talking about who's going to win coach of the year with like 1 week left in the season. And so I know that the Lions were still alive for the playoffs, and Jordan was like, Danny Campbell, and you and I were like, no, it's going to be Daboll, and it ended up being Daboll. So I know last year there was at least some groundswell for Dan Campbell to win coach of the year. So I don't hate the pick. But for me, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, that's part of it too. Is I think the ball definitely had it because again, he took a team that wasn't expected to do anything. They'd been bad, and then he made them way better than they were. That's why you win coach of the year. So now when I look, I'm like, well, I think he's now exempt because the expectations for the Giants are high enough that you're just exempt, right? I think it's sort of like Andy Reid. It's really hard for you to win because you're already expected to win 14 games. If you don't win, it's a failure, right? So some of these coaches get exempt because they're already really good at what they do. So I look at Campbell, and if he's able to do a thing that hasn't been done in 30 years, that could be the thing that pushes him over the edge. So,
Yep.
yeah, who do you got? Who do you got at coach of the year?
Yeah, so look, for me, I'm going to take this in a direction of I'm basically going to try to do my best here so what you were kind of saying there kind of is where I was taking with it, right? So last year, Daboll, he won it, so he basically can't win it this year, right? Like, I mean, I guess theoretically he could, but like it's really, really virtually impossible to go back-to-back coach of the year.
Mhm.
And so once you have those kinds of expectations put on you, typically you kind of see a new faces come in for that next season. So for me, I think Daboll is basically out. Shanahan, I think he's basically out. I think Dan Campbell is kind of basically out, and I think Doug Peterson is basically out for coach of the year this year. And somebody who got snubbed from being in the short four there was Nick Sirianni. I mean, come on, man. The guy won 14 games last year and was not a finalist for the coach of the year. We had the tied for the best record in the league, and it wasn't an option. And I think when we do it again this year, when we have 12, 13, 14 wins again this year, people are going to go, wow, this guy he's really good. We messed up last year. We overlooked him. We need to do right by him, right? And so for me, I think Nick Sirianni deserved it last year, and I think their voters are going to make it. Maybe deserved it last year is probably a strong way to phrase it, but he deserved to be a finalist last year. And because he wasn't, I think the voters are going to look into it this year and say, hey, man, this is a top flight offense, top flight defense. They have one of the best records in the league again. They're the number 1 or the number 2 seed again. We got to give this guy some form of recognition. And so therefore I think Sirianni is going to end up getting the coach of the year this year.
Yeah, I think the other key point there is he lost both his offensive and defensive coordinator. So if he comes out and puts the same kind of product on the field with an entire new coaching staff, that definitely says something for who's at the top, and not just being able to say, hey, like it's because X, Y, or Z, that guy did what he did. So yeah, he's on that line. But yeah, I could see it. You could see it. All right. So that wraps up our predictions for this upcoming season. Now we get into the fun part, the spicy part, the hot takes for 2023. I'm excited for this. I got some good ones. I'm excited to see how you take some of these. Because I went spicy. Spicy. Going back to my roots back home, right? We're gonna do it hot for these hot takes. I'll start us off just because the first one I'm gonna give you guys, I already picked this year during the off season, so I'm just gonna double down on it. And here we go. My first hot take: the Buffalo Bills will not make the playoffs this year.
You don't even have them making the playoffs?
They do not make the playoffs this year. That was my hot take when we broke down our divisions, and I'm sticking to it. I'm locking it in. They do not make the playoffs at all. They're out. They don't make it. Bye-bye. I know you're going to want to hear it, so I broke it down. They're not winning their division. I already have Miami winning that division. So if you got the Dolphins, Chiefs, Bengals, Jags, those are my division winners. Boom, that's 4 spots. That leaves 3 spots left over. All right. We already talked about how great we think the Chargers are going to be, even if they fall on the face. All right. If I got Herbert winning 12 games, that puts them in. Boom. That leaves 2 spots left over. We've kind of mentioned the Ravens being able to take off a little bit, new offensive coordinator. Lamar might fall on his face in the playoffs, but he doesn't need to win the playoffs. He just got to make it. Boom. The Ravens go. All right. That leaves 1 spot left over. And when I'm looking at these teams and I'm going, man, who could make it? Right. And I get it. Well, if you want to throw the Broncos out, you could do it. I know there's people out there who have them in it. But I'm like, who teams could take it? Man, the Titans were 1 seed 2 seasons ago. They got some new weapons for Tannehill, and Derrick Henry's still Derrick Henry. Am I saying they win? I don't know, but they could. How about the Browns? Deshaun Watson comes back to any form that he showed when he was in Houston. We got to forget, the guy didn't play for 2 years when he came back, all right? Now he has reloaded offensive weapons, and he's got a full year where he can actually practice and get ready to perform. All right. See any sliver him back? The Browns could go. And the Jets. I thought the Jets could be a huge disappointment. And I still think that they're not going to perform at the level a lot of people think they are, right? This whole Jets are winning the Super Bowl thing, I think is blown way out of proportion. Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, watching Hard Knocks. I don't know. But Aaron Rodgers looks like a guy that he hasn't been for a long time in Green Bay. And I'm not talking about his ability to play. All right. I'm just talking about he seems re-energized to want to play the game.
Seems happy.
Yeah, he just seems like he wants to play. And I don't care what you want to say about the dude. He was a 2-time back-to-back MVP 2 years ago, right? Like, the dude is a stud, right? Win was not great last year. I mean, like, it's not like he's like vastly removed. I'm watching some of him in the preseason. I watched Peyton fall off a cliff, okay? So I know what that looks like. He don't look like he's falling off a cliff. I watched Drew Brees when it was like, hey, man, like he can still make the reads. But he just doesn't have the arm. Rodgers still has the arm, okay? So he's still there. He wants to play. Man, whether you want to admit or not, that roster is loaded, okay? And again, I don't think they're winning a Super Bowl. I don't. I think they're going to disappoint for what people think they are. But man, could they make the playoffs? I think they could. And if they do, bye-bye Bills. You can't make it. That's the last spot.
Man, that's definitely a hot one. And what's funny is as each passing day goes on, I want to get closer to your side, but man, it's really hard to. That team, they crank out 13 wins a year, man. Like they do, and they're really good. But day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, Stephon Diggs is being Stephon Diggs, and he's turning into a bit of a prima donna, and he's being a bit of a distraction. And then the head coach didn't handle that very well, saying, yeah, he wasn't at practice today. I'm concerned. Very concerned. And then 24 hours later, he's like, why are you guys saying that I said I was concerned? I never said it. So I I get where you're coming from. I get that the vibes are there, but that talent on that team is really, really good. I think Sean McDermott is a very, very good head coach. I think Josh Allen is still a superstar. And I think Aaron Rodgers is on the decline, and I think that O-line is garbage. So it doesn't matter to me how good Aaron Rodgers is able, how well he's able to make those reads and how much of a cannon he has. If the man has 1.5 seconds to read and his best weapon is Garrett Wilson, and outside of that in the passing game, it's Alan Lazard. Like, I don't know, man. It's a hot take. Like I said, each day I'm kind of getting there closer and closer. But for me, that O-line and the age of Rodgers is probably going to be the downfall of why I currently disagree. But I can see it happening. It's not a bad take.
Again, you want to talk about the downfalls with the Bill? We can talk about
Sure.
the ball is gone. We can talk about the fact that Josh Allen's throwing a ton more picks in the red zone. We can talk about Stephon Diggs looking like he thinks that his shit don't stink and he's just the greatest thing in the world. And he's pissed because they keep making the AFC Championship. Like, how dare they? Right? Like, but we look at all those downsides, but then we also look like, yes, they were winning 13 games, but who are they playing? The trash Jets, the trash Dolphins, and a Patriots team without Tom Brady. Now you're looking at a Miami team that's legit. I mean, like, it was the same reason the Patriots were winning games. You were guaranteed 6 wins a year because everyone else around you was so bad. Like, when Brady left and the Bills completed their full takeover, I mean, that's what it was. Like, you were going to win 5-6 games a year guaranteed because no one else in that division was going to do anything to you. Now I'm looking at it going, Bill might be a bad GM, and I don't know how long he's going to be around, but it's Bill Belichick, and he could still win from you because that's just what he does. And the Jets look like they're pretty good. And yes, the Bills are pretty good, but the Dolphins are pretty, like, it's not a walk in the park for them to just win 13 games because they're given 6, right? You take a bunch of those away, like, they're not dominating the division, and all of a sudden it's like, man, you're maybe a 9-win team. Well, 9-win team is not guaranteed the playoffs, especially if I'm taking 2 other teams from your division to make it. I don't know, man. I don't know. There's too many teams I could find, and maybe it's not the Jets, man, but there's too many other teams I can look at and go, man, you could have the year. You're close enough to making that bubble that you could push them out if they're down there, right? So that's my hot take number 1. Bills. I'm doubling down on it from earlier. The Bills missed the playoffs.
All right, cool. So I think I'll start off. I'll go from, like, it sounds like you came out hot. I think I'm probably gonna.
That's not even the spiciest one.
All right, fair enough. And I'm going to work my way up. So for me, hot take number that I'm going with for me, we kind of spoke to it a little bit earlier. I said that this is going to bleed into some of the hot takes, and that is Kansas City not making the AFC Championship game for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career. And so I think that this year I have the Bengals and the Bills both being wild card teams this year. And Mahomes has struggled a lot playing both of those teams, man. And so between the Jags having an easier schedule, it's possible that the Chiefs don't have the number 1 seed and therefore don't have a bye. And so therefore the Chiefs are going to have to play either the Bills or the Bengals somewhere in the playoffs. And Patrick Mahomes is 3-2 against the Bills, so it's pretty much a 500 game, and if they play again this year, I could see them losing. And then he's 2-3 versus the Bengals, and he's 0-3 other than last year, the most previous win, right? So it's not a great record against either of them, and it's going to be really, really tough for them to end up making the AFC Championship game if they have to play either the Bills or the Bengals. They're the only 2 teams that have really of note that have any kryptonite against Patrick Mahomes. Weirdly enough, the Indianapolis Colts are 2-0 against him, but I don't think that's going to be a problem this year. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, man. I think that the Chiefs they're gonna struggle a little bit more than I think a lot of people think that they will. I don't like their offensive weapons outside of Kelsey and Mahomes. Because, I mean, look, while Juju Smith-Schuster, he might not be a great wide receiver, he still had almost like 800 yards last year. Mm-hmm. He was still their wide receiver 1, and who'd they replace him with? Nobody, right? They have Kadarius Toney, who was often injured, as their number 1. And then from there, it's just a bunch of, I don't even know who. It's, just Sky Moore, Justin Watson, a bunch of guys that have less than 500 career receiving yards. I don't see how they're going to be able to, get past that. And with the minimal run game that they may have with, Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire if he's still around. So I don't know, man. I don't like the Chiefs as much this year as I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, Kadarius Toney is not even listed as the wide receiver one on their depth chart.
Who
I think
is?
he's like, I think it's MVS and Sky Moore listed as their 1-2 starting in their two wide receiver sets. It's those two guys.
Yeah, none of those guys.
Not him.
None of those guys have more than 700 yards in a season as their career high. So yeah.
Yeah. Look, I know you said it's not a hot take, but considering, like I said earlier, like they until they haven't done it, it's almost like they're penned in. So
yeah.
All right. We're gonna go on to my hot take number 2. All right, I'm gonna flip my 2. We'll leave the spiciest one for last. All right, hot take number 2. And this is kind of a this year and then into next year hot take, but when I was looking at it, I think that's how I wanted to play it. Kyler Murray does not take a single snap for the Arizona Cardinals this year.
Okay.
He is hurt for the entire year as they proceed to tank with their terrible, terrible roster.
Yep.
On to the number 1 overall pick. And Kyler Murray is the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons come 2024.
I like it.
That's my second hot take.
I like it. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It's a little less spicy than the Bills one, but
yeah, it's okay.
But I can see it happening.
So here's the thing. We did not go over hot takes before this, so you don't know what my hot takes are. I don't know what your hot takes are until we've unveiled them. Let me add on to yours, because my hot take is that the Cardinals are going to have the worst ever plus minus in NFL history.
God, they're so bad.
So Ben, what team do you think has the worst plus minus? I guess, give me, what year do you think the worst plus minus in NFL history was set?
2012, the Lions.
Nope, it was 1976 by the Bucks. Do you know how many games the Bucks played in 1976?
14.
They played 14 games with a total plus minus of minus 287. They lost by an average of 20.5 points per game. 20.5 points per game in 14 games is the NFL record for the worst plus minus. The Cardinals have an extra 3 games now. They have 17 games to break that record. All they have to do is lose by an average points of 16.9 points per game to break that record of, going minus 288.
So Sam Howell and the Washingtons, they open against Arizona in Arizona and are like 9-point favorites in that game.
And it's Washington. It's not going to get any easier.
With Sam Howell. Like, I mean, it's not like Mahomes is going in there. Like, I mean, it's going to be ugly this year, man. And that's why I look at him like Kyler's already hurt. So it's not like he could start right now. And I don't know, man, like if you're 0-9 when he actually is healthy enough to maybe step foot back on the field, like maybe you just say, maybe they just say, forget it. And they trash it. And when I look around the league, I say, hey, man, Atlanta what are they missing, man? They got a decent defense. They got a stud running back. They got a stud wide receiver. They got a stud tight end, and they have no one at quarterback. So I'm like, man, they could struggle this year enough that they're like, man, the piece that we're missing, we've done, they did it backwards, right? Normally you get a quarterback and then try and find pieces. Like all those 5 pieces into a quarterback. They get there, go, man, so close. We just need a quarterback, and Arizona's going to have to move it. Like Kyler's going to play quarterback somewhere next year, right? Because these contracts just one that you can't get rid of him. I think he could end up there, man. He could end up in Atlanta. So
no, I think that's very possible. Sticking with the Cardinals for a moment there. It also doesn't help the Cardinals that they cut their long-term backup quarterback and Colt McCoy the other day, right?
Yes.
So like, I don't even know. Yeah, right. Like I don't even know what I think they're actively trying to tank. Like I don't know if we've ever seen a team actively tank in the NFL this hard before. I remember a couple of years ago with
suck for luck.
Well, no, I was a little bit more recent than that. It was tank for two. I remember the Dolphins were terrible with Brian Flores as a coach for the first 10 weeks or whatever. And everyone thought that they were actively tanking because of how bad that they were. But then they ended up winning like 4 games at the end there. So clearly they weren't actively tanking. I think this team is actively tanking. You don't cut your long-term backup quarterback who is going to have to play the first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games in the NFL this year for somebody who you don't even know. I think they probably have the worst coach in the NFL. Did you see that interview the other day, the clip the other day that came out with Jonathan Gannon?
I was like, yeah, I was gonna say you do know that their coach was your defensive coordinator, right? But
Yeah.
then you said I did see it, and
Did you take the bus to work today? What?
oh, that wasn't even the one I was thinking. I thought it was
man,
when he said he wasn't going to name his starting quarterback because it gave him a competitive advantage. No, bro, it does not give you a competitive advantage to not name your starter. That is way up on my list of shit that coaches say that I hate, right next to when you draft a quarterback number 2 overall and say that you're not sure if he's going to be your starter or not, and he has to earn it. No, bro, you took him number 2 overall. He already clearly earned it. Okay, so
no, yeah, there was a clip that came out where Jonathan Gannon, they were showing him speaking to the team in the meeting rooms or whatever, and he's like, "All right, everyone, all right, who has the fire in their gut today? Yeah, who here drove to work today? Who here took a bus? Yeah, I hope you had that fire in your gut. Like, what?
bad.
What are you doing? That man could not motivate me to make a sandwich, man. Like he's awful. He's awful. So I don't know. I think if the Cardinals are lucky, they'll be set up for the next 10 years after this. I think if they're lucky, they'll have the number 1 overall pick, and then they'll end up having to get Caleb Williams. And then if the Texans are terrible, because they have the Texans pick, they will get Marvin Harrison Jr. with the number 2 pick. If you can do that, you are set for the next 10 years, I think. But yeah, my hot take there though was that they're going to break the worst ever plus minus in NFL history at minus 287.
Gonna be ugly. All right, so we got 2 takes left. My last one, your last one. Mine is an NFC one, and it's pretty damn spicy. So, I mean, I can do mine. You think yours is pretty spicy? All right, we'll finish on yours.
You do? I know mine's spicy, but yeah,
mine's gonna be toasty. All right, you ready? We'll do mine.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up with yours. So here we go. My final hot take for the season: NFC. The number 1 seed in the NFC this year is going to be the New Orleans Saints.
Ew. That's not even a hot take. That's a bad, Ben. That's a cold take, Ben. That's a bad take. This is a bad take. Go ahead. I can't. Go ahead.
I know he doesn't like it. Look, I do not respect Dennis Allen as a coach.
Clearly you do, but keep going.
That said, Derek Carr is a big upgrade. Everything out of camp for the running back room has been great. I think Chris Olave is that dude.
Sure.
Jimmy Graham, at 38 years old, can still box out people in the red zone, apparently. I don't know if you saw that clip of him just absolutely murking a corner. Yeah, look, everybody said, hey, they're going to sign Jimmy Graham at 38, and then he's going to retire, and then he didn't retire.
Yeah, I forgot.
And then he went into a preseason game and just absolutely boxed out and just wrecked this corner. And I was like, well, apparently, look, I don't think we're going to see Jimmy Graham running routes, but in the red zone, apparently he still cannot be covered. So, look, it's not just that. Like, I think that their offense is going to be a lot better than it was last year. I don't think their defense is as bad as people thinks that they need to be. I think they still have some pieces there. So I think they're going to be not a great team. I think they're going to be an above average team. All right. No, let me finish. Their schedule is so beneficial to them that I think that they could legitimately win enough games that they win the number 1 seed based strictly off being a better than average team and playing horrible teams for the entire year. Similar, if you remember a couple years back when Tennessee won the number 1 pick, and it was like, how did they win? But they won games. Oh, like they won like 14 games. People were like, they weren't even that good. And they got bounced like right away because they weren't a phenomenal team. but they just beat teams like over. They played nobodies and won over and over and over again. And I look at this schedule and I'm like, all right, they played Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee is going to be great this year. They play Carolina. They're going to be trash. They play Green Bay. Don't believe in them. Tampa. They're trash. New England. Nobody's buying into them. Houston. Trash. You love any of those teams they played so far? Let's keep going. Then they play Jacksonville. Jacksonville's going to be really good. They might lose one there. Then they play Indy. They're going to be shit fire. Then they go and play Chicago. They're going to be bad. Then they play Minnesota. They could win that game, but they could not. I think that's a better matchup than people think it is. Then they play Atlanta. I don't think Atlanta's very good. Again, I think they're going to be better, but I'm not sold on Desmond Ridder carrying this team to a division title like you are. And then they play Detroit. Again, I think that could be a toss-up game. Then they play Carolina again, trash. Then they play the Giants. Then they play the Rams, who are probably going to be bad again this year. Then they play Tampa Bay. They're going to be trash. And then they play Atlanta again. I can see 14 wins there. I'm not saying I'm going to guarantee, but I can see 14 wins in this team. I can see
like
13
6 to 8 losses there, man.
No, man, no. You give them Jacksonville. You give them
start at the beginning again.
Tennessee.
They could lose that. Derrick Henry's still a beast.
Yeah, but Derrick Henry does not become a beast until snow falls in Vermont.
Don't care. So, Derrick Henry and D-Hop are still beasts.
So, Carolina.
Yep. Yep.
Green Bay.
Yep. Keep going.
Tampa Bay.
Keep going.
New England.
I can see them losing that game, man. Bill does what Bill does. It's possible.
Okay, well, I'm siding on the fact that I'm not saying that they're not going to lose them. All right, Houston.
Yeah, keep going.
Jacksonville.
Yep, 3.
Okay. Indy.
Keep going.
Chicago.
I think they could lose that game, but I'll be nice here. Keep going.
Justin Fields is trash. Minnesota.
4.
Atlanta.
I think they'll split with Atlanta, so I'll call it 5, and I'll give them the win the next one.
Detroit.
6.
Carolina.
Keep going.
Giants.
7.
Rams.
Keep going.
Tampa Bay.
Keep going.
Atlanta.
Keep going.
That's it.
So that I told you I had about 7 to 8.
So you have the Saints going 10-7.
Yeah, that's not nearly enough for the 1 seed.
You're right. It's not. I'm saying they beat Tennessee. They beat New England. They're going to beat Minnesota or Detroit.
So you have them going 13-4?
13-4, easy enough. And they could beat the Giants because I don't know how much I'm sold on Danny Dimes.
For me, it's not a Danny Dimes thing. It's more of a Saquon thing.
Sure. But I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying that they could or couldn't lose that game. I get it. There are some of these games that could be closer. I'm just saying, if I'm going to a coin flip game, Tennessee's, Green Bay's, New England's, my coin is landing on the Saints more times than it's going to land. Just like the Vikings last year, turning around and winning a bunch of games and not losing a single one-score game. I'm saying the Saints can win more of these games. And if they win 13 or 14 games,
so here's the thing. Even if they win 13 games, I don't know if that's enough to get them the 1 seed, man.
I don't know.
Philly could win 14 or the 49ers could win 14 or 15. Like, I don't even know.
They could. But both of those teams are playing a much harder schedule this year. And I'm not saying they couldn't win 14 games.
I know.
I'm just saying most teams don't win 14 games. Like a great season is like 12 wins. So if they both win 12, and I'm looking at the schedule, I'm like, this is a garbage schedule, man. Like, you wrote it down and you gave almost every single coin flip game to the opposition, and you still gave them 10 wins. So they would need to win 3 of those coin flips to have the number 1 seed on an average season. I think it's not out of the question. So I got the Saints winning the number 1 seed.
All right, we'll put that one in the fridge because that's going to stay a cold one. All right. All right. So for my hot take, my big hot take of the year. Sorry, Ben. I think you are already privy to this one, so I don't know if it's going to give you any shock value. But for the listeners, my hot take of the year is that Sam Howell is going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback in the NFC this year. I think that you and I have talked a little bit about this throughout the year. But look, I mean, Washington, I think they're going to be pretty decent this year. I think that the new ownership change is going to be massive. And I think that Sam Howell is going to really step up this year. The kid has looked pretty outstanding this preseason, right? And I know it's just preseason, but if he looked awful, we would all be killing him for it. And so while I'm not saying that it's exclusively because of the preseason that I'm ready to put him at a Pro Bowl level type of a quarterback, he did start one game last year against Dallas, and Dallas did win 12 games last year, and Dallas had everything to play for in that final game of the season, right? If Philly lost their final game, then they win, and Dallas wins. Dallas wins that division. And if the 49ers lost their final game, they win the 1 seed, right? So they had a potential to jump from the 5 to the 1 seed. They were playing with everything on the line. And Washington went in there and rolled them 26-6 with Sam Howell as their starting quarterback in his first ever game. The kid was projected to be a first-round pick a couple of years ago, but there was some coaching turnover, and there was a lot of bad play calling in UNC that final year for him. So we fell to Washington in the 5th, and I think he's just going to be a very good quarterback this year. I think he's largely going to look like what Geno Smith looked like last year for a lot of people, where a lot of people are writing him off. But, you know, I know he hasn't been in the league nearly as long as Geno Smith, so no chance he wins comeback play of the year or anything like that. But I think in the sense that everyone wrote him off, but he's going to come out, he's going to prove a lot of people wrong, and he's going to look like a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback next year.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between those two is Geno was that guy who got the chance and just sucked, and Sam Howell's just kind of been written off because he's a 5th-round pick, man. Like, but I like it. I agree with you. I'm a big Sam Howell guy this year too, and maybe it's just because I want a guy whose last name is Howell to win and do really good. But yeah, I'm with you. I like that one a lot. So, all right, some good takes. Like I said, I went spicy with mine. We'll see how they go. I know you won't let me forget any of them by the time the season ends. So, hopefully the Bills miss and Saints win number 1. So I don't have to hear about this for the next 12 months.
The Saints is the one that you really got to worry about. That's the one I'm going to hit you hard with. The Bills one I can understand. It's the other one that we're putting in the fridge. It might, I might even take it out of the fridge. I might throw it into the freezer, man. There's a chance that this one's happening.
No chance, he says. All right, we'll see. We'll check back halfway through the season and see how we're looking on our hot takes. All right, guys. As always, we're going to wrap it up with another test Mike's brain. Last week, Mike lost. The first one he's legitimately accepting. So we'll see how he does this one. Lost on a green card. Where are we going today?
What are my options for cards?
Green, yellow, blue, and
all right. Let me rephrase that.
Red.
Let me rephrase that. What do the cards signify? What categories are
all right, so you got player stats, team colleges, and player careers.
Let's go with team stats.
Okay. I like this one. All right. So again, these are last year's stats. I'm going to give you the wide receiver 1 and 2, tight end, quarterback, and running back stat lines. You tell me the team. If you need to dial in for some help, you let me know. The wide receiver 1, 1,048 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns.
Okay. I mean, like Evans, keep going.
The wide receiver 2, 1,033 yards, 9 touchdowns.
Okay.
The tight end, 486 yards, 4 touchdowns. The quarterback, 4,282 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 picks. And the running back, 1,050 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns.
So I got some bad news for you, Ben.
Yeah. What's that?
I know.
You know who this is?
I know what team this is. I know what team this is. This is a team that clearly has 2 top tier wide receivers. One of them you are not a fan of, my man. You thought that he was a little overrated coming out of college. You thought that he was a little overblown when he was taking some shirtless pics. You didn't like some of the boasting of his own lifestyle, stuff like that. The running back, Ken Walker, there is pretty darn good, although unfortunately it sounds like he's going to have a down season because he's going to be splitting hairs with Zach Charbonnet, and on top of that he's also injured. And then Tyler Lockett is my boy. You know I love me some Tyler Lockett. He was a guy that I took in fantasy for a couple of years, and then I would take him in Madden because he was fast, shifty, and I just really liked him a lot. So yeah, with all that being said, this is the Seattle Seahawks.
You locking it in?
I am Tyler locking it in.
Yep, it is the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, the 9 rushing touchdowns is what
Okay.
confirmed it for me. The dual 1,000 yards. I was there with Godwin and Evans, and I was like, I don't think Godwin had over 1,000 yards. And then when you said the touchdowns, I was like, no. I was like, they didn't combine for this many touchdowns. I know it's not them. So I had to keep cycling through. I was like, who else had good wide receiver duos? And then suddenly, bam, there we are with the 9 touchdowns on the ground. That's Ken Walker. Let's go.
Well done. So fun story. When I was putting all these together for it, I actually made 2 Seahawks cards. So apparently they really wanted to test you on the Seahawks, and then it didn't even stump you. So good job. All right, man. Impressed. You said Mike Evans there at the start. I was like, okay, maybe we got him. And then yeah, you see it on your face. Yeah, they locked in there pretty quick. So it is the Seattle Seahawks. Well done. Mike wins another round. So I think that puts you at 4-2 in your career. We'll keep this going, and we'll see. He wants to be 4-2-1. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed those predictions. Give us your own hot takes for the season. We'll see you next week.